Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the special council meeting with the express purpose of presenting the budget for the public for the first time. Meeting number 5 held Monday, March 4. I'd like to ask you that all your cell phones be turned off. I would also like to point out that Councillor Gannan sends her regrets. And for those who are interested, or could you please sign in the attendance sheet? And this meeting will be audio, video recorded. Also like to just ask that all members of the Horseshoe, councillors, we're getting a lot of complaints on the audio video that we're not speaking clearly into the mic, so try to have them within 6 inches of your mouth. Well, obviously the mic being on, but sometimes there people are sitting way out there and it's not working. You and I can hear it, and I know that, like dads tend to have that ability to project. I'm just saying, for the purposes of the video and the audio, we need to be speaking a little bit more directly into our mics. Just wanted to point that out. It's been a common complaint. For the first time, Councillor Rayner.
I just wanted to know your budget to replace the entire parts of the project.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, so there we go. Yes, we just yes. Okay. At this point, are there any members of council that have any disclosures of pecuniary and or conflict of interest? Seeing none, I'd like to move on to staff reports. Treasurer, Director of Finance, Donna D. Philippus. Information report, RFIT 119 2019 draft operating and capital budget information report. Councillor Cody, you have the motion for this item.
I do. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Trombetta. That report RFIT 04-19 regarding the 2019 draft operating and capital budget information report dated March 4th, 2019 be received for information.
And that was moved by Councillor Cody, seconded by Councillor Trombetta. So at this point, I'm going to ask the Director of Finance to present her PowerPoint slide deck.
Thank you, Mayor Bylsma. The mic's working. Good.
Beautiful.
Okay. As the mayor indicated, this is our first look at the 2019 draft operating capital budget. Final budget approval is scheduled for March 25th. And if necessary, we have the following night reserved as well, March 26th. A public open house to discuss the budget is scheduled for this Thursday, March 7th at 7 p.m. The agenda for this evening, we are first going to look at the 2019 operating budget. We will review the service level change requests, the 2019 capital and special projects budget, and finally, we'll look at the 10-year capital plans. The 2019 budget includes expenditures totaling just over $15 million, and that's in the operating fund. This chart gives council information as to how the expenditure is allocated by functional area. More than half of the operating budget is expended on environmental and transportation services. And just a reminder, environmental services covers water, wastewater, and stormwater. This chart gives council a sense of how the budget is being spent. 39% of the budget is dedicated to employee compensation, which is both salary and benefits, and that totals just under $6 million. The second largest category, contracted services, includes amounts we pay to outside agencies or vendors for services. This includes $1.2 million paid to the region for wastewater treatment and approximately $626,000 paid out to outside vendors within the transportation services area. Also included in there would be legal fees and auditing fees. In terms of revenue, the largest source is through the tax levy at 47%, and the second largest being user fees, which is largely comprised of the fees collected through water and wastewater, and they total just under $3.5 million. Government transfers is mainly comprised of the OMPF funding, which is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, and that comes in at $954,800. The next category, other revenue, is mainly comprised of donations, in particular the wind turbine community fund of $420,000, and interest and penalties on taxes at $320,000. Payments in lieu represent funds collected through exempt properties at the federal or provincial or the regional governments own. And the final is fund reserves, 3%. This chart is a summary of the 2019 budget. It's also included in Schedule B of your report. And also within Schedule B of your report is the detailed budget by department. So this is a summary of all of them. And then within that Schedule B, you'll see them broken up by each individual department. So the budgeted expenditures and revenue result in an overall tax levy increase of $460,670. This represents a 7.18% levy increase. Assessment growth is estimated at 2.39%, which equates to $153,000. This means that the first $153,000 of the tax levy has no impact on taxes paid. After factoring in growth, the estimated tax increase is approximately 4.68% or $56. That is a number that's presented on the report that was submitted to council. Also to note, we always talk about average assessment when we look at impacts to taxes, and the average assessment for a single detached family home in 2019 is $363,877, and that's about a 5.5% increase over the 2018 value. So I'm just going to highlight some of the factors that are contributing to the tax levy increase. So the first one is $307,000 approximately, and that represents the third and final year of the tax increase for the recreational center. The second item, just under $55,000. In the 2018 budget, council approved the hiring of 2 truck drivers. That hiring was prorated in 2018 just to represent the 2018 impact. This number here represents the 2019 impact. There's an impact of $7,000 through the elimination of the tax-free allowance for council. What this number represents is, with the loss of the tax-free allowance, certain benefit costs that the township pays, namely the pension plan, CPP, and employer's health tax, also increases. Impact of a planning position in 2018, the decision was made to change the position from contract to full-time, and these are the costs that impact the 2019 budget. Under the crossing guard area, there's actually a savings of $8,100. In 2018, we budgeted for staffing increases. Warrants have been completed, and those hirings do not have to take place in 2019. Overall compensation, which includes salary and benefits, have increased approximately 2%, and that represents $128,000. We've budgeted for an increase to fuel costs, and that's linked to the increased demand on our vehicles. In particular, during big winter events, the amount of fuel that's used significantly increases. The next item, 14,000, represents the full payment of the interest and principal on debt that we issued for Bridge 12, I believe it was. Part of it was budgeted in 2018, and this is the final amount that we need to budget in 2019. There's an increase to urban storm, and that's related to storm sewer assessments that need to be done, and these actually need to be done annually as the whole storm sewer system has to be assessed. There's an increase of 15,000 in the operating budget to deal with a pedestrian crossing upgrade on Highway 20, and also some railway crossing improvements. They both are budgeted at 15,000 for a total of 30,000. The recreation programming has lost some grants that were available in 2018, which is often common with the type of programs that they provide. So there's been a loss in some grants for senior programming, and a loss in grants for the movie night that they provided in 2018. Mitigating item is program support. What that represents is under corporate services. It's mainly a supportive kind of department, and part of those costs are allocated to fee-based departments such as water, building, wastewater. And there's been a bigger allocation to those departments to represent the increased services that have been provided. And finally, there's another mitigating factor. In 2018, there was a larger amount of capital being funded through the operating fund. That has been reduced by 99,000. So these are the overriding impacts to the operating fund. Now, just to talk a little about water and wastewater rates. The total budget for water and wastewater is approximately 3.5 million, and this is all funded through fees. In 2016, Council approved a water and wastewater rate study and financial plan, and that recommendation from that plan was to increase water and wastewater rates 5% for 5 years from 2016 to 2020. So keeping with that plan, there's a proposed and recommended increase to fees effective July 2019 of 5%. So what we have, we've presented what the impact would be, and this would impact the last two water bills issued in 2019, the September billing and the December billing. Within this water, wastewater, there is a transfer to reserves of just over $500,000. Again, that's funded through the fees. So just some items for council to remember when they're reviewing the 2019 budget. A 1% increase to the tax levy is $64,000. If there is a 1% increase to the tax levy, it equates to an approximately $12 increase to taxes. Another way of looking at it is every $10,000 that's added to the budget or removed will have an impact of $1.82 to property taxes paid. So this chart, which is similar to the information that's in Schedule A to your report, outlines the service level change requests that have been brought forward from staff. In Schedule A, there's a detailed explanation outlining why these service level changes are being requested. I'm not going to go through them right now. If there's any questions later on, we can address them. If all these requests were to be approved by council, the 5572 increase in taxes would equate to $80.29 increase. The way the chart's been presented to you, we've shown you the annualized impact, the impact to 2019, 2020, And we've indicated individually what the impact is dollar-wise to taxes and percentage-wise as well. Now, just moving on to capital. This chart summarizes the 2019 capital program based on service area. And most of these service areas, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Perhaps the last one, traffic operations, roadside services, just to clarify that one, it's really anything to do with roads, other than the pavement of them or bridges and culverts. So it's almost anything to do with transportation. It includes, for instance, a lot of sidewalk work in 2019. This slide shows you how capital is being funded. And the largest financing method is through reserves. And just to remind council that some reserves are designed to be funded for a while, and then there's a draw on them. It's often that's how the reserve is designed. Also, water, wastewater, equipment and fire, there's significant funds put into these reserves every year, and then they're drawn upon every single year as well. The development charge revenue, which is the second largest, that's related to growth capital items. So items that are related to growth within the municipality, and they're outlined in the development charge background study. Now, this chart outlines the 2019 capital based on the kind of asset that is being improved or replaced or a new asset. The largest amount of funds are being expended on rolling stock, which is another term for trucks. Now, the next few slides represent the individualized or departmental capital projects. And the way we show these is we show tangible capital assets on the top, and then down below are special projects. It's all considered capital. It's just some of these are actually capitalized for financial statement purposes, and some of them aren't. The way these are presented is you can see the expenditure, and then we indicate how these items are being financed. So under corporate services, a lot of the capital is related to infrastructure, information technology, The difference when we present to you the 2019 final budget, each of these items will have a justification sheet where the managers, directors have indicated exactly in detail what the project is related to and what it's about. Again, these are all in your report as well. Fire, as you'll recall, the pumper rescue station 2 replacement was originally in the 2018 budget and was deferred to 2019, so it's presented here. Transportation services general, these are vehicles that are purchased that relate to all the different types of services within transportation, so they're not just coded to, let's say, paved roads. They come under general. So you can see there's replacement of 2 vehicles here, a single axle dump and a tandem. Under roads paved, there's 1 hot mix project and 3 surface treatment projects. Under bridges and culverts, there's a replacement of Patterson Road deck on that bridge, and also the annual guide rail replacement that the township does every year. Under traffic operations, roadside services, there's quite a bit of sidewalk projects, and a lot of this work is related to the large project the region will be conducting along West Street or Highway 20. I believe council's aware of the roundabouts that are going in and the stoplight. So because they're going to be doing all that work, this is the best time to replace sidewalks that really aren't wide enough for the code as it is today, and also to install some new sidewalks. Also included under this area is the annual ash tree replacement. We've been allocating $50,000 for, I think this is the third year, to deal with the ash tree loss. Wastewater and stormwater. Under wastewater, again, the large projects are West Street and Wade Road. They are again related to the work that will be taking place on Highway 20. And then there's also under stormwater, a stormwater master drainage plan that needs to be developed. And a lot of that is being funded through development charges because it'll be looking at what's needed for growth in the municipality. Underwater, the main project is the West Street replacement of the main there. Again, that's related to the Highway 20 work. Cemetery recreation programming. I laugh because I thought it's funny that they're on the same sheet, but it's the only place I could fit them. Just some small capital items. Under parks, the largest item here is playground equipment at the new Smithville Station Park, which will be in the new development there. Again, that's largely funded through development charges. Okay. Recreation facilities, just not anything really large, just some repair and maintenance items that are necessary. And under library, there are regular collections that are purchased every year. They're partially funded through development charges. And there's a request for upgraded software of $30,000, and that's to replace their Mandarin software, which is what they're using right now. Under planning, some studies. 4 of these studies, the College Street, the East Smithville, the Spring Creek, and the St. Martin, I believe they were presented in a report to council, I believe in late 2018. And there's some work in Wellandport, a community improvement plan and a streetscape plan. The idea behind that is I believe the region will be improving that section of the road in 2021. So we want to be ready with some streetscaping to go along with that. So now the next slide is a summary of the 10-year capital plan. So this is where staff estimate up to 2028 what the capital requirements will be. This is something the township has probably been doing since perhaps 2015. It hasn't been that long. It's always being fine-tuned and improved. But it gives you a sense what type of projects the staff is indicating. In your report, I believe it was Schedule I, the last schedule, you'll see the individual 10-year capital plans by department. And finally, this is the last slide, and this is the one that shows you how we plan on funding the 10-year capital. I have to alert council, though, that some of these reserves that are contemplated, in particular the bridge and the capital, at the rate we contribute to them now, there wouldn't be enough funds to fund all these projects. That's where asset management comes in a lot, because that's where you have to fine tune these plans and do long-term financial planning to determine what projects are the most needed and how we would be funding them. So that is the end of the PowerPoint presentation. Their directors are here to answer questions as well as myself. So,
Thank you, Director. Discussion. Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, AKA Mr. Mayor. Do we get, through you to the Director of Finance, do we get a binder like we got last year, breaking down the capital costs into each individual item so that we can see the total?
through you, Mayor Bylsma, to Councillor Rayner. At this point, we were presenting Schedule B, I believe it is, that indicates the budget by department, and it's summarized by what we call objects or the kind of expenditure it is. If we weren't planning on giving out the detailed GL budget binder, but if it's the wish of council to receive it again, then it will be available as usual, and that's always distributed with the final budget report, not with this initial budget report.
Through you, so things like in 2020, there was money allocated for a new fire hall for Caister Center. So I will see that on the final report?
Through you, Mayor Bylsma, I believe that's actually in Schedule I. It's the last schedule in the report. There's departmental capital plans, and I believe if you look at fire, it should be indicated there. So the detail in which we give out capital has not changed.
Okay. Through you again. With regards to the new building, the MERS, well, we're calling it that for now because that's what it's been forever. Anyways, are there any associated costs that are directed towards this building due to its size?
Through you, Mayor Bylsma, yes, it's indicated on the report. It is, it's on chart 4, which is page 5 of the report. We've indicated the operating costs that are included in the base budget and are funded through the increased tax levy, the $307,000. So these costs, such as utility cost, insurance, some added staffing, are included and are related to just operating the facility and keeping it open.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Finance, is that on top of what it would have been in the old arena?
Yes, the additional funds we put for hydro, natural gas, water are additions to what we would have had in the budget in the past, definitely. All of these costs are, because insurance costs increase because the value of the building is higher. Larger facility, there's more in repairs and maintenance. Additional cleaning costs, the cleaning of the parking lot, and some additional staffing. So yes, it's all related to the new facility and their additions to what was in the base budget in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, my concern with this is what we brought up, as I'm sure you were aware of at the time when we were determining the massive cost of this project, which was just a tad under 31 million by the year 2048. We were concerned, and I believe we both brought it to the attention of the rest of council, that we haven't even discussed the costs of operating this facility. It would be above and beyond the nearly $31 million. And of course, back in 2015, when we initially talked about the arena, we wanted to have at least 50% of it fundraising so that we could keep the cost down. That somehow disappeared, and there was nothing with regards to a commitment for fundraising or any money ahead of time before the construction of this building. Therefore, basically, everybody in this township is on the hook for the cost of this building. And according to the way it was laid out, it was 5.1% in 2017, 5.1% in 2018, and now the 307,000, which is 5% in 2019. That is added to the tax base, which means it's compounded. So that 5.1, 5.1, and 5 now comes to tuition. It is now 15.99, which is like 16. Together on top of that is operating and capital costs, which are added on top of that every year till the year 2048. The only offset to that is assessment growth, which tries to reduce it. But the impact to the taxpayer is very, very considerable amount of money over the next number of years. What I'm trying to say is, in my diligence of knocking on every door in my ward, there was very little sentiment towards this building. There was a lot of opposition. And it was reflected in the results. That's why you're sitting there right now. Basically, I believe the people out there are saying enough is enough. If we are going to have a building like this, last week we had Chris Fleur from the Minor Hockey League. I asked him if they were doing any fundraising to help offset. He said no. This is what I was worried about, was the fundraising to help offset this. In order to eliminate a tax increase to the people on a building that has already tremendously impacted them, I would ask that the rates be set in this building in such a way that it offsets any incremental costs above and beyond what the other arena would have had. They've got the new building. For example, it's like if you go on vacation and you need to rent a car. You can rent a Fiesta for $200 a day, or you can rent a Delaney for $2,000 a week. The choice is yours. So if people are using the facility, it only makes sense that they should be paying more, because the people who don't use the facility are already paying for the building. So if you're using it, then you still get a deal because they're also paying what they're not using. So I would hope that somehow we can deal with this situation, that we're not increasing the taxation to the people in anywhere in the township that didn't support this, other than the fact of the construction of the building. I think enough is enough. This is huge. And it was a huge factor knocking on doors, as I'm sure you also felt. The other thing was that we haven't addressed here is we have a $420,000 YMCA, which through you to the director, that's another $52,500 that's added on to this year. Is this not year 5?
Through you, Mayor Belsma, it is included in the budget as it was included last year. I don't exactly know which year it is, I'm sorry.
Well, I believe we started it in 2014. It was passed in 2010. For some reason, nothing happened in 4 years. And then we started in 2014. So this would be year 5, I believe. Now that there's $64,000 equates to 1%. Last year it was, I believe, $59,000 equated to 1%. Last year it was 0.9. This year it's 0.8. So if you add, if you look at this scenario, we have 4 increases in taxation to the township from the tax base that are something we have to deal with every year. Number 1 is the YMCA, which is 8 years at $52,500 that we have to pay and will be paid by the end of this term. The next one is we have the MERS at 23.6 at 3.45%, works out to $30.96 million. That has to be paid by 2048. That's a 15.99% in tax increase. And then we have the operating and capital costs, which we have to determine every year. And they're multiplied against what's in the tax base. So it's tax upon tax upon tax. If you do the graph, the taxation due to the MERS increases dramatically the last 10 years. It could be $300 to $500 additional above your regular taxes, unless it's reduced by assessment growth. So what we have to be very careful of is with this situation when we're dealing with looking after this new building, as there already is a lot of taxes already incorporated onto the township that wouldn't have been there had we not had these 2 events. So, and I also feel that they do restrict to some degree the capital expenditures that we can do, because you can only take so much out of a stone. And we can't expect to tax people and tax people and tax people, but by the same time, we've got commitments and stuff that need to be done elsewhere in the township besides the MERS. So we cannot take further taxation with labor or whatever it is to look after this new building. When we've already addressed it cost-wise to build it, we've got other things in this township that now become the priority item. So I'm hoping we can come up with some fee or whatever that makes this building self-sufficient. And I'm hoping we can look in that direction. The other thing, of course, is we have Bridge 34, which has not been mentioned. And I believe Bridge 34 will be addressed in the next week or two through the Director of Public Works, if that's not, so I'm not sure where this is going to sit dollar-wise. That's still up in the air. And the other thing that's very important in this that hasn't been mentioned yet is something that had not been done in the last 8 years, and that is to do some tar and chipping on some mud roads in the township of West Lincoln. And I'm not talking just my ward, I'm talking Ward 2 also has roads to be done. And I believe there's a few in Ward 3 that also deserve some attention. So I think it's time that we now focus some of this money back out to the people in the country who are paying for a lot of luxury items that they don't use. They want some little things back to say that we're all part of this township. Let's everybody have a little piece of the pie. And I think it's their turn and they deserve it. So I'm hoping somehow we can work together on this and then work out something that we can start a progressive way to start eliminating some of these mud roads in the country and giving some people some decent transportation. So that's what I'm saying right now. I'll probably have more down the road, but if we can start on that, I know you have a feeling with regards to tar and chipping, and maybe you've got suggestions you can do, but I think this is the time to talk about that because we need to incorporate in the budget, and it is important that we start this year and do something every year during our 4-year mandate if we could, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Cody.
Yeah, I think to look at raising the rates of the West Lincoln Community Center is a dangerous path. It's going to start a snowball effect. If it's going to make the building less accessible to people who use it because they can't afford maybe other means of entertainment. And if people are not using the building, then that's going to increase the operating cost even more on the township. And I feel I'd also like us to get away from this. I had many constituents too who weren't happy with the mirrors, but we are going to be asking the people in Ward 3 to pay for a bridge that doesn't benefit them at all, and they'll probably never drive across in their life, to pave roads that they're going to drive on. They're never going to drive on at all. So to be separating the municipality like that is not doing anyone any good. We have this facility now, and with growth, unfortunately, also creates growth in expenses. And I just think that looking at increasing the costs of using the facility is going to, in the long run, cost us even more than the plan we have in place.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else wishing to weigh in? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I echo Councillor Cody's remarks there because I do agree. I think if we got to come up with some kind of idea, but I worry as well that if we go the route of trying to raise those user fees or whatever other fees we need to accommodate that, we might end up having a reverse effect and actually have it used less. And I think right now you got to look at it as it's a brand new investment. You know, some of us obviously weren't here when this idea became reality. Now we're just kind of stepping in and trying to figure out how to steer this ship. But that being said, I think if we tried to do anything that was going to decrease the way it can operate, we're going to actually probably lose more financially speaking than we would gain. If anything, I think we got to find a way to make it more attractive. And I think the rates have been set for us, I think, definitely embody that. And so that being said, I think if anything, if we find a way to kind of encourage I don't know, more programs or events or festivities that happen there, then that itself would just naturally snowball into a financial gain for the community versus putting a pricier price tag on it, making it less attractive. And so, yeah, that being said, I also think, I know this was done, and maybe not to the degree, but I think we could probably work harder to find somebody out there or some organization out there that would hopefully come in and maybe put their name on the building. And I know there's been some stuff done in the past, and just because we were unsuccessful in the past doesn't mean we should give up on that idea. And I don't think we have given up on that idea. But if there's a way council could direct staff to maybe pursue other ideas or alternatives, then we should be focusing on that. And I don't think trying to cost cut a facility that's brand new, that's barely got its legs up in the sense of operation purposes, is going to help that. If anything, we should be investing more into it. Unfortunately, it's the investment that the previous council had chosen to invest into, and now we got to make it grow. Otherwise, if we go backwards, we're going to have a $30 million building that's absolutely useless because we don't have staff for it or we don't have people coming in. And why did we get it? So, anyways, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate what Councillor Cody and Councillor Riley said. I was trying to get my head around it how to, but what we didn't want to do is create a large financial burden, which we have right now until 2048, and then compound it because now it's a liability to keep it operating. It's like you're sinking all your money into one basket, and that's not necessarily to the benefit of everybody else because there's so much else involved in this township besides this project. And if we consume 1 or 2% of a 3 or 4% budget every year by keeping that running, now that we got ourselves into a situation where we have to because we've got it, we've really got ourselves into a pickle here where we've restricted getting other things done in this township because, like I said, you can only take so much blood from a stone. And if 1 or 2% of a 4% budget is just to keep this thing running, then we're not going to get much done anywhere else. But I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how to get around that without something suffering. And the only thing I could think of is let the users, because that's what you normally do, whoever uses it should pay for it because they're using it. So why should I pay more than I have to? I've already paid for the building. Just as an idea to say, we've got to free this money up somehow, not tie it into the building as a liability, as an anchor, and use that money for the other things, like I mentioned, that we want to get done in this township, that would increase the taxes and put it so high that people would really be upset with you, because not only are you funding that, but now you've made a 6 or 8% a year tax increase, because somehow you got to get this other stuff done, and you can't do it if you're bleeding it all into one place. Thanks.
Councillor Riley for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Rayner. I also think this is the timing of the community, the West Lincoln Community Center opening is a very fragile time in itself. And what that's saying is we haven't really had a chance to see it get used to its full potential. And so that being said, obviously I don't have numbers or projections for you, but I think this is unfortunately, I think we have to take the risk that we got to see how this year one looks like before we start worrying about cutting services or operational funding before it's even get a chance to get started, because I don't think that's going to help us move forward with the facility if we're already doing that to try to free up space to do other things. I think, unfortunately, we have this this beautiful new building. We have to somehow make it work financially and fiscally speaking, but at the same time, we're barely into year one with it, and without seeing what that financial growth is going to be, like to go and jack the rates up without anybody even using it, I don't think that is, and not to repeat myself, but I don't think that is the best route right now. I think this is a very important thing to talk about, and I'm very grateful Councillor Rayner has brought this up here, but at the same time, I think we need to be looking at that idea maybe a little bit closer into year two to see what could have been done differently or more efficiently in the 2019 year moving forward. I think it's just too new to start looking about trimming, reducing, I guess, resources in the facility that we need to kind of flourish. And for all we know, we go and make these, we bring in these new staff or whatever it's required to do, and it's full 24/7. We don't know in the next 3 to 4 months what that looks like. And that being the case, we might have a completely different opinion or perspective on things next year. But to give it a crutch so quickly into its early stages, I think would only limit our potential in year one, because it's we're test driving it essentially at this point. We didn't really know what we were getting beforehand, and now we have it. I'd hate to go and start removing parts from it, slowing down its full potential. So I would be interested in just seeing how it goes this year without worrying about changing too much out of what's already been set out. So thank you.
Councillor Jonker.
Yeah, I agree with that. We don't want to see, I think that building should pay for itself, and especially when it comes to the fees that we approved of last council. We did increase the the fees that we were charging for the old arena. So we have a whole new rates and fees that will be coming out. And I think it's gonna take a little bit to see how much we increase our revenue by. So I think the idea is still that the building should pay for itself, especially when it comes to operation. And I think we need to give it a year to see how much money we are gonna be taking in. If you look at the, what they have proposed to do, we're gonna see an increase, hopefully. Local school track meetings, so when they come to use the track, there's gonna be a $45.25 fee. So there's a lot of things here that are new in this building, and I think it's gonna take us a year to find out what we can make with it. So I think we do need to put our faith in the staff that they figured out that, okay, this is what it's costing. Here's all the options that we have in the building now. There's rooms that we can rent out. That's all there, right? $28.32 for a room to rent. So all these things, we have to see how it goes to see if we actually meet our budget. So I think we have to wait a year, and then we can have the discussion again to say, okay, we need to adjust the rates because this one's not working, this is being rented, and so I think we need to give it a year before we can say, hey, we need to increase them. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how well this building does for us in that, so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jonker. If I could just ask two quick questions of the director. Just for the sake of the record and for public knowledge, what's the increase of the region and how does that going to affect the overall bill? I have a good, strong idea because I was there,
Okay.
but just to have it come from
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, I believe the region came in at a 3.8% increase. It's difficult to determine exactly what the impact is to the township. There's a few reasons why. Firstly, the way the region allocates the whole tax levy is based on assessment. And as the township's assessment goes up and other Niagara municipalities, their assessment goes down, our township actually may end up going higher than that 3.8%. Another thing to consider is that the region has not formalized their tax policy, and the tax policy is where the weighting of assessment comes in. If you remember from your training, I know you remember, we talked about, how commercial is weighted differently than industrial. They're going to be meeting in March to discuss that. But to put it in perspective, last year, let me just check my note. The regional taxes, their budget increase was 2%. And the impact to the taxpayers in West Lincoln was $65. So I would imagine that at 3.87%, you'd be looking at more than $65. So that would be a good estimate, good rough of, you're probably looking at over 100, I would think.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of get that as part of our base of understanding with respect to the tax bill. The other question that I had, and I asked, looking at from 2018.
Sure. In January, I presented the December update, and at that point, we were projecting a surplus of $350,000, mainly driven from increased supplementary tax revenue and interest on our investments. This budget includes $100,000 of prior year surplus, so that's taken into account.
Oh, that's hard to.
The balance, what we typically do is once our audit is completed, we present to council the final 2018 figures, and we often recommend that the surplus gets transferred into different reserves. And which, you'll see reserves being drawn down in this budget, and then that's an opportunity to put additional funds into those reserves.
Okay, so I just wanted to get those two pieces of information on as well. So, anyone else wishing to speak? Oh, there we go, Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thanks, staff, for putting this budget together. This is D. Philippus. Thank you once again. It's my 5th budget, and it never gets any easier every time. I always thought by the years went on, it gets easier, but it seems to not be getting easier. But anyways, long story short, I know this is the last year for the 5% for the recreation facility. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
It is the third and final year, yes.
So we're already in March. I noticed that staff came back for some additional positions that they want full-time. I understand their service needs and things need to be executed, and, you know, we need help, is what they're coming out and pretty much saying to us. You know, but we're already in March. You know, do we have to go full-time? Can we do something maybe part-time? And then once that 5% is off, it frees up a lot of. Can I continue here? Thank you. Can I continue here?
Yeah.
Once it's off, it does free up a little bit more, and maybe that some of these positions that are required, you know, can get pushed to full-time, is what I'm looking at. I see another one of a gypsy moth. Maybe it was bad last year. Is it going to be bad this year? We don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So how are we going to say let's budget it when we don't know? So there's a bunch of things that we can still work with, not saying no to everything, but maybe kind of meeting halfway to get sort of a same result. And then, you know, as the year progresses into next year, that service level can be increased. So that's one way I'm looking at it, but that can come at future talks. The other thing too is it's kind of, again, we're going to have to wait to see. Hopefully next week I can work a little bit more directly with, I'm not going away this March break, so I can work a little bit directly with the director and seeing once that cost comes out for Bridge 34. I'd like to see that obviously incorporated into the budget. The one question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director of Finance, Ms. DeFilippe, is last council, we did a surface treatment in Ward 1, if I recall. And we came in under budget at that time. It was the will of some members of council that when we did come in, there was a surplus, and what I brought forward last term was to extend the contract. The will of council was not to extend the contract, was to put that extra money, and I think it was around $200,000 or so, into a bridge reserve directly for Bridge 34. I didn't see that anywhere. Where is that? Or am I missing it? Probably I am missing it myself.
Through you, Mayor Bilsma, to Councillor Trombetta, I believe the resolution was to transfer the funds into the bridge reserve, and it has happened. On Schedule E, we outline what our projected balances are in all our reserves. And if you look at the bridge reserve, we're projecting a balance of close to $260,000 at the end of 2019. That does not include Bridge 34 because, as the report stated, we're awaiting a report at the admin meeting in March, and depending on what direction is given from that meeting, we would incorporate Bridge 34 into the budget. So that transfer did take place in 2018.
So just so we can refresh my memory, what was in the bridge reserve before we put that money in?
It would have been less the transfer.
So I just
money-
don't know the actual transfer that,
Yeah.
that funds that we had.
I can look it up. I don't know it off.
Okay. But
Do you want me to look it up?
it's about 200,000 is what we had that we allocated to the bridge reserve. And I thought it was for Bridge 34. I don't know what I know that was set around the horseshoe at that time, but maybe that wasn't actual in the.
I don't believe it was actually in the resolution. It just said
That's what I don't,
transfer.
that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve Philippus. There wasn't a resolution. So I know that we did have that money there, so I need to to obviously work with the director, and obviously hopefully a number comes back that we have, and so I hope it's the will of council that that was money that was allocated for that bridge at that time, which we knew about, that was an issue at that time when we resurfaced these roads and we had a little surplus come back to us. I also campaigned hard on resurfacing some roads in the country. You know, it's been a long time since a gravel road's been resurfaced. And the will of being a councillor here is I want to see at least one of them done. I made it clear to all members of staff and public and members of council how I feel on resurfacing some roads, and I want to see a gravel road get resurfaced or multiple gravel roads get resurfaced. I don't want to just say one, but because that's I'd like to see multiple gravel roads get resurfaced. So you know, if that's gonna maybe change from resurfacing some other roads that we were on that are slated into this capital, we might do that, but we're gonna have some further wholesome discussion around the table. Other than that, I think, you know, like I said, the bridge is one big concern, and the tarring and chipping of some gravel roads is also, so I would like to see, kind of want to maybe get away from tarring and chipping an existing tar and chip road at this moment, because I think some of them are still in really good shape, and I don't want to go down a road that we have to resurface it if it's still in decent shape. So hopefully we can transfer some of that to another area of need for in the certain 1 or 2 or Ward 3 where it is needed. So we're going to have some more discussions. This is not finalized, but again, I'd like to say in closing, thank you to staff and Mrs. CAO and all our clerks and all the directors for putting this together. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and we'll need to appreciate that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I see you. I just wanted to get just a couple of points in myself, if I could, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Rayner. One of the biggest challenges that I have had to wrestle with this particular budget, in one is the small good news is I finally got answers for some questions that I had 2 years ago. Most of them were answered on in the service level change requests, and the one that was discussed earlier when Councillor Rayner was asking about the increase in cost of the larger, newer building. But in the discussion surrounding the West Lincoln Community Center, as it's now called, I had asked on numerous occasions for information with respect to how much more the building was going to cost. The answer at that time was it was going to actually be cheaper to run because it was going to have LED light bulbs and run on a much more efficient power plant and those kind of things. Those are some of the answers that I got. Now, I didn't buy it, but I was looking for some kind of more factual response than that. I got that tonight. It's about $99,000 more, which is about 1.5% at the $64,000 per percent. The other question that I asked often is how much more staff is going to be required for the whole facility, and we got that tonight as well. Under service level changes A, B, C, D, E, and maybe even F, you could say, but certainly those first 5 to the tune of about $140,000 is a response about how much staffing is going to be required. And I find that really hard to swallow, because it would have been very appropriate to know this information before we went down the road of the community center. Before we had that information, this information was not delivered as part of a plan to build this facility. And I don't exactly know who to blame or if even blaming is going to be appropriate thing to do because the building has been built. But I really feel that somehow the taxpayers were robbed of this information that they're now getting here tonight. I'm not prepared to vote for this budget with this service level changes. They're not going to get the 2.3 or 2.03 in incremental changes that they're asking for this community center from me. If the other councillors, of course, decide to do that, that's something they answer to the public for. But I'm not prepared to do that. And it's not that I'm having a hissy fit because I didn't get the answers before, but I think that the taxpayers are on the hook for the 5% increase that was passed on for those who voted in favor of the 2017 budget, that we would do 5%, 5%, 5% more or less. And that one we're obligated to do because we have to pay for the building that's now built. But to add another 1.5% for service level change requests, more FTEs, and approximately another 1.5%, it's almost actually 2%, so it's almost 3.5% to run the building. Okay, you do your math your way, I'm doing it my way. But more or less, there's another 3%. If you say 3.74, that may be more accurate. But there's another 3% at least on top of the 5 for this year, and I think that's really unacceptable. And we have to make a cut. And I'm not necessarily proposing that a cut. Certainly, we're not. I'm not asking that we can't increase the staff there, but at the expense of something else. So I think we need to trim 3% in service level, at least 2% in service level, in order to pass this on to the, before I'm willing to pass this on to the public. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Councillor Rayner and Councillor Trombetta are saying, that if I'm going to pass on a 4 point, what was it? First page. A 4.68% increase to this municipality without putting forward 3 kilometers of tar and chip road, I'm not prepared to approve this budget. So my ask, quite simply, I'm comfortable with the 5% increase for the MERS because that was something we inherited. And I would like to see 3 kilometers of road, tar and chip this year, and squeeze the rest out of service levels. Cut where we need to do this. I think the time has come where we can't. There has to be some pushback, and I like the facility. I've enjoyed the facility on several occasions already. I've probably been in there 4 or 5 times skating, and just walking around. And my wife's used the track, and it's all beautiful. But the track doesn't need a service level increase, and so that's kind of my ask. That's where I'm trying to finesse this budget to. I can be pleased with a budget that goes up that 5%, and then but it has 3 kilometers of roads paving in there, and then we send it back to staff to find how to finesse what I think is a new direction for council. But again, I'm just one vote. But that's what I think needs to happen for me to approve this budget. Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's sort of alluding to what I was saying at the beginning of when I was speaking, that this is the last year for the 5%. So, and we're already in March, and by this time it's done, it should be the end of March. So my whole my whole tactic was just, when I was saying that, is that if the service levels get postponed in the future, or cut, is what I was trying to say, I think that would be better. And I tend to agree with you. I want a township roads, 3 kilometers would be great, and that would be a real bonus for myself. So I tend to agree with you. Where we're gonna do, like I said, for the Willow Council, I don't know, but that's why I was saying, once that 5% is off, it opens up a lot more. So thank you for continuing on, but you kind of said it a little bit better than I did, but.
Councilor Rayner.
Thank you.
I apologize.
No, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. I'm baffled and confused and frustrated and every other word adjective you want to use in this. I do not understand what Councilor Trubenda means by once it's off. The 5.1 that was put in 2017 is there until the building is paid for. 5.1% in 2018 is put into the tax base and is there until it's paid for. The 5% that's put in there right now is going in that tax base, and it's there till it's paid for, and it's compounded, all those 3, by everything else that's added operating capital for the next 30 years. This is on there till 2048. It doesn't come off. So you've automatically got a 15.99%. I'm talking about prior to the MERS. You have 15.99 added right now that's compounded every single year until 2048 by everything else you want to add to it. On top of that, to this date, you got 4.7% added by the YMCA. You still got 3 years left on that one. And if you got a 4.68 operating in capital, the actual increase, had none of this occurred, would have been 4.68. But because of the other 2, the taxes is actually 25.37. Now that's for 31% of the West Lincoln portion of your property taxes. 15% is education, 54% comes from the region. But it's not off, it's on. And this was my point initially when I brought this discussion up is, and here it is, I have got the binder from last year, and I've even noted on the recreation, nobody's discussing what the cost of operating this new facility would be. Nobody wants to discuss it, all he wants the building, and don't worry, as the mayor says, it'll be self-sufficient, it runs itself, just turn the key and leave it, not going to cost you anything. Well, guess what? That was a game that was played in order to get this massive $31 million building done. And I agree with what you're saying, although I haven't seen it. Everybody's saying this is a gorgeous building. Well, if I sunk $31 million into something, it better well be bloody good, or I would be pretty ticked off. So all I hear is positive comments, but for $31 million, it damn well better be positive comments. But anyways, the other thing is, when you take that $99,000 to operate, divided by the $64,000 given by the director, that's 1.55%. When you take the $140,000, which the mayor alluded to, going down to E for the labor, divide that by 64,000 equals 1%, that's 2.19. You add that together, we got 3.74% added to run this facility on top of 15.99% you already done for a $31 million project, and you've only got 4.68 to start with, so 4.68 subtract 3.74, you have got 0.94% of this budget to look after the rest of the township. This doesn't make any sense. This is what I was worried about from the beginning, and now most of those councillors, the taxpayers have told them how they felt about it. They're no longer here. The majority of those who supported them aren't here anymore. We've got a situation right now where this thing is going to be an anchor. It's going to be a liability that's costing us a fortune, when in reality it was supposed to be a great thing. But the only answer I could come up with is somebody's got to offset this, because the fundraising demand wasn't put in initially to help offset this, and now the people hopefully were going to come for fundraising aren't coming to the table, so this cost is going to increase. We need to deal with this situation now, and the only way I can think of it is we've got to increase the cost. And I appreciate what Councillor Cody and Councillor Riley are saying. We don't want to scare people away, but by the same token, we don't want to make this a massive liability to the township for the next 30 years, because we have to do everything possible to keep this thing running, and everything else around it is sacrificed. That's not fair either. We have a huge township, and it doesn't focus on one damn building. It's a huge piece of property. West Lincoln is the largest municipality of the 12 municipalities in the region of Niagara. We got almost 500 kilometers of roads to look after. There are other priorities besides this building. Let's get focused. Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely correct. We've got to drop this number somehow. And the only thing I could think of is we got to get revenue in. The only thought I had, and maybe it was wrong, and if it upsets people, I said increase the fees, I'm sorry, but you're using it. If you're using it, you should pay more than somebody who doesn't. If you've got another way to find this revenue, that's great. I'm all for it. But we shouldn't be consuming everything but 0.94% of this budget to keep this building going. And nobody wanted to say anything last year. It was a big secret, as you and I know, and that's why you and I are the only two that didn't support it, because we knew there was something rotten in this egg. And we're finding it now.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? I don't exactly know what the solution is, except that we do need to either generate more revenue or cut. So I don't know if I'm not pleased. I can't trust that the answers will come down the road, because I've asked the questions that I raised were raised 2 years ago, and the answers were not given, and they're coming here tonight. And so I would echo this from Councillor Rayner, that we can't move forward with this budget thinking that a year from now that revenues may come in, or we found a revenue source that's offsetting the increased expenses for this building, or something like that, and just assume that it will fix itself, like a kind of a Trudeauian pipe dream that, you know, you do this and the taxes will take care of themselves kind of thing. The budget will balance itself. That's ridiculous. So I think it's very incumbent upon the staff, and I'm not looking to just the treasurer to fix the problem, because it's all of staff that needs to come to the realization that to add another 3% or almost 4%, 3.7% to the budget to operate the recreational facility is just not acceptable. And in addition to the 5% that it's going up to pay for the building, in the bricks and mortar of it. So some kind of plan, either that's add revenue on the boards of the arena, whether that's banners, add banners, whether that's more sponsorship, whether that's a midsummer fundraising pie eating contest. I don't know, but somehow the staff has to come forward with a plan that will generate some kind of revenue to offset this 3%, because I don't think it's appropriate at this time. And I don't. We have staff in place that are currently running an arena and a library, and the gymnasium obviously is new. But perhaps even the solution is some form of volunteerism, volunteers staffing some of the time, or volunteers at the library. Two of these positions are at the library. But at this point, I'd be loath to approve this budget and pass it on to the constituents. So again, we have to be a little bit creative. I know that the region at one point came with a 5.65, and it didn't look like we could budge. You know, the police were asking for 6.5%, and everybody was like stonewalled. And you know what? One councillor said, "You know what? Enough's enough. I want this dropped to below 4%. I just want it dropped to below 4%, and I won't vote for this until it's below 4%." And he had the gumption to kind of say it, and sent it back to staff, and they worked. And they went to the police, and some of the boards and agencies tightened up their belts, and they got it to 3.87%. So it can be done. This is a suggestion by staff. It's a very good suggestion, but at this point, I have troubles with it. Councillor Jonker.
Yeah, I've never done a budget like this, or how we do things. So there was a couple things I did highlight. And not to pick on the library, but and it's not a big number, but they're asking for staff for Sunday for 4 hours. Something like that, I think we can cut away for now. I know it's showing only $3,500, but I don't see the need for that, so there's something like that that can start to cut expenses back. And yeah, I do agree, this increase is too much for me to say, I'm happy, let's go ahead. Also with the arena, I guess what I was trying to say is how much do we think we are gonna get in revenue? Did we actually get projections with the last fee, when the fees were set? That's to the director, sorry.
Yep, through you, Mayor Bilsma. The report that was presented to council, I believe it did indicate the increase. Keep in mind that the rates that were approved in 2019, that they're only going to be reflective of a portion of the year. For example, when it comes to arena rental rates, you're only going to be seeing the benefit of the increase for the last 3.5 months of the year, because it's effective for the September for the next season. I believe the field rental rates were not really effective until 2020. So there is an impact. I believe the room rental revenue, I think it's budgeted about $12,000 in the 2019 budget. That's new revenue we've never had, because we've never had meeting rooms to rent.
Councillor Rayner.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, both Councillor Trombetta and yourself and myself have alluded to the importance of tar and chipping some mud roads. And you had suggested 3 kilometers. I had done some research with Public Works to determine the average cost of kilometer of a couple of roads in particular. Concession 5 is on Councillor Trombetta's mind to do, and they estimate, because there's a lot of gravel needed because of its level and elevation that has to be required before they can hard surface, is $160,000 a kilometer. If you multiply that by 3 kilometers and divide it by the 64,000 given by our director, that's a 7.5% number just to do the roads. Forget about the 4.68 and all the rest of this stuff. So I'm really getting, where are we going to find this money? If we do concession 2, which is my pet to get done, and I'm just talking about my ward. Everybody's got their own ward. This is just our ward because we live there. Concession 2 is a much higher elevation. There's a lot less gravel required. It's only $120,000 a kilometer, which is probably the cheapest you're going to get any road in the township of West Lincoln. $120,000 a kilometer is pretty darn cheap. You multiply that by 3 and divide it by 64,000 for 1% equivalent, it works out to 5.6%. So regardless of what we're looking at, a cheaper road to do or a more expensive road to do, we're anywhere between 5.5% and 7.5% on top of this 4.68. So I know we want to do it, but I'm not sure we're going to find the money for this. So that's another, I don't want to add another clog to the wheel, but we do want to get this done. But this is far greater than the 4.68 that the finance, Director of Finance put together for the township. I don't know, we need a lot of discussion about this one.
Councillor Trombetta.
Yeah, thank you. Which I tend to agree with Councillor Rayner about the roads. Concession 5, I don't know where that number of the actual 3 kilometers it is. I don't know if it's is it actual 3. We're not.
I just wrote number 3.
I borrowed it.
So we're not sure. We have a new director that can probably have some more engineering ways or ideas that we could get some. So I don't want to just go with that hard number there that it's 7.5%. So, that was from previous term of council where we were trying to get those figures. But yes, I do agree. Those are some of the tar and chip roads. But again, if we could do what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, 3 kilometers, it doesn't mean 3 kilometers in one ward. Maybe it divvies up between a kilometer in each ward per year to break it off, right? So, but, and again, each area, or if that's 3 kilometers in one ward for 1 year, and 3 kilometers goes in the other ward the other year, and 3 kilometers go in the other ward the following year, whatever. You know where I'm getting at. But those numbers, I'm not saying you're wrong, Councillor Rayner, but they can't be taken as hard numbers because we don't know. We have a new director now, which can kind of give us a newer idea and kind of get more of an engineering perspective on those roads first off, right? So
Just This is a matter of clarification. When I said 3 kilometers of road, I'm not thinking for a moment that I get to pick them or anybody here gets to
No,
pick
but that
them.
number
I think
3 is getting thrown out so
I
much.
know, but I would totally acquiesce, as a mayor of the community, I don't care which 3 get done in which ward. I'm not going to be, parochial that way. But I would say that, the director, I would take full direction from the Director of Public Works.
That's what I'd
Right.
like to see,
And-
before we send out some numbers that are, not saying his
No.
math is wrong, he could be
Yeah.
100% correct, but until that,
So, but at this point, this is when the budget was floated for the first time publicly, and I'm just putting some, my high-level thoughts on it. So go ahead, Councillor
If I could
Rayner.
comment on what Councilor Trombetten just said. This was before the director came, when the other director left. In between that time, I went to the Public Works manager. This is from Steve. These are his actual costs based on the work that he's done on having the costing done for these roads. So these, I didn't want to come here and just throw fictitious numbers. When we're talking numbers, the only relevance is if you're not dealing with the right numbers, then this whole thing's a waste of time to start with. I do my homework before I come here. 160 for concession 5 and 120 for concession 2 came from the manager of Public Works with information he had on studies already done on those roads. So these numbers are accurate. But like everybody says, it could be 3 kilometers in any place. I don't think you're going to get cheaper than 120,000 a kilometer no matter where you go. I'm just saying it's going to be above 5% minimum, whatever 3 kilometers you come up with. So I just don't know where we're getting it from, but these numbers are accurate.
I'm gonna, yeah. Yeah, so I was gonna go to CAO Hendry.
Thank you, and thank you for the interesting discussion on what we presented. There's just a couple points I want to make sure that I'm, I guess, describing or explaining, and potentially a correction. The 99,000 that has been addressed as the increased cost for the base of the West Lincoln Community Center, as it's now called, are part of the incremental tax increase. So they're in that 306,000. So it's not in addition to. So just to be clear, that's not another 1.3 on top of the 306,000, which represents what 4%. So that's a point. Now, when it comes to the getting information from staff about the tar and chipping and asking a manager who may not know where the context is coming from, the procedure is that he's supposed to be going through the CAO down to the staff to get the information, because he would not know why the question was being asked and how that information was going to be used. So I think the more prudent way is to take it to our new Director of Public Works. I don't even know if we can get the sort of base engineering that you need to figure out what sort of base is in any of those roads that you're talking about to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. Also, this year, we're working on the asset management study, which is actually going to get that data to help support those decisions as we move forward. So this is just something for council to think about as you move forward. And I think those are my points for now. Thank you.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of want to just make a comment about a comment you made actually regarding, I guess, the volunteer aspect. I find it kind of interesting that could even, and I'm sure you just mentioned that, and just in casual, just as an idea of how to offset expenses. But I think it's pretty hard to ask our constituents to not only pay for this building, but hey, we just took $31 million from you. Do you mind working it for us too? I don't think that's a direction we should go. I also, as a business owner, and you're a business owner, so I think you can relate. With volunteers, you get what you pay for, and if that's going to, I guess, translate into the facility not being to its full potential that it could be, because someone one day decides they just don't feel like volunteering or whatever that situation may be, or they can't say, something else comes up. Again, kind of is, I don't know, in my opinion, is a disadvantage for our community. And then even just to mention Councillor Jonker's comment about, and I think it's a great idea, we're looking for areas to cut stuff, but I assume, and maybe this is a question for the library CEO, that the reason they want 4 hours kind of seems like a funny number, but I suspect there must be a public feedback and requesting that the library's open. Here's the thing, we're paying, I guess, about $31 million plus for this facility, and if it's not accessible to those who've already contributed to it or, are forced upon it, then, we're not doing them a just by any means. We're not doing them a service by not having it accessible to them. And so obviously, maybe there's something there. But again, I still would like to express that I think it's important that we're in year one, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't before, but looking at this, from an investment level or as a small business level even, to me it feels like you just be doing it a disadvantage by not trying to equip it in year one to be successful. Like, if you go the opposite direction with it, you're almost guaranteeing that it's not going to give the results we need for year two to make these comprehensive decisions that are going to make it more successful going forward. So again, I think we should be very careful with where we're going to, I guess, cut this, this stuff like from the bottom here, because like you're looking at everything and some of these costs are kind of unavoidable. So again, I won't drag on here, but I think what we have here is we need to kind of, as Mr. Jonker said earlier too, kind of have some faith and give it a chance here to see what we got for year one and then reassess things as we go. I don't think we're necessarily holding out that it's just praying that it's going to be successful, but we got to give it a chance and then make a more educated decision once we've seen what it's done for us after we've already tried it, and we haven't really tried it so far. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure that was on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question. Well, first of all, I don't have quite a dim view of volunteers. You get what you pay for, because I think sometimes we think volunteers, we shouldn't think of them as worthless, but more priceless. Sometimes volunteers surprise you, and they usually do, and that's why they're so heartwarming. So I don't want to. It was just a suggestion, but at this point, I don't think we want to disparage volunteers. The other question that I had was about asset management plans, and I'm going to ask the director of finance this question. Asset management plans. Are they not a plan for the status quo? That they find the whole organization as it is and maintain the status quo on that structure? All the assets that are here today and now, simply to maintain them at their current form. Is that what an asset management plan? Or does it tell you how to grow? No, that's a bit of a philosophical question, but if you could answer that, if you need more clarity on my question.
No, through you, to you, Mayor Bilsma. The asset management plans that you've seen to date, we've done 2, they focused on current assets. The new legislation that was passed, I think, in late 2017, is changing it up. You are to look at growth and what it does and how you have to plan for that. And you're also to look at service level, what you're providing now, what the public would like us to provide, and what it costs.
Okay.
And that's why the province has given us, I think, till 2024, because it is a very detailed and very consuming process that will eventually, it will drive budgets. It'll drive how we make our decisions.
Yeah. I thank you for that, because I've always had the idea that asset management plans are somewhat static, dealing with the status quo, and they're not necessarily like so for example, in the past, an asset management plan would not tell us to build the community center. The community center was a decision that we made that propelled the community forward, and now as an asset, it needs to be managed. So it shows no volition. But you're telling me that they're changing the asset management plan definition by saying it should exercise a little bit of volition in terms of, or it can be exerted upon to include a road paving program or a parks program or a hot mix asphalt upgrade on a surface treated road and those kind of things.
Yes, to you, Mayor Bilsma. That's where service comes in.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Would you, yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Director.
Just to clarify, the amount that was transferred to the bridge reserve was 255,000
Yeah.
from the underspending. Yeah. And also just to clarify, the CAO addressed the fact that the approximately 99,000 in increased operating costs are included in the base budget. Chart 3 are service level change requests.
Yes.
They are items that are not included in the base budget, and it's council's decision whether or not to add them. So they're not cuts, they would be add-ons at your discretion.
Right, okay. Everybody clear on that? Okay. So we floated it. We've had a discussion. Any final discussion? So the motion before us right now is to receive this for information. I want to just ask a quick question of the NCA. Okay, all right. So we've received this for information. It's part of the public dialogue now. So there's no action to this except that we're floating it out to the public. So all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, staff, for putting this together. I know it's no small task, and it's certainly not easy from our end to receive and to discuss this, because I've done this too, also 5 times. We have other business. Moving on to other business, Councillor Mike Rayner has a presentation of council remuneration. Councillor Rayner, you have a motion for this item. Do you have the motion first? Yeah.
I'll read the motion.
Yeah.
Moved by myself and second by Councillor Christopher Cody, that members of council salaries be increased to $25,000 for councillors and $38,500 for the mayor, effective January the 1st, 2019, in lieu of the elimination of the payment of a 1/3 tax-free allowance which took effect January the 1st, 2019, and to correct member of council's salary levels.
Councillors, it's been moved by Councillor Rayner, seconded by Councillor Cody. Councillor Rayner, you have a bit of a discussion that you want to lead out with. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This was something that was going to be discussed last term with regards to remuneration, but we never quite got around to it. It's a difficult thing to do when the process basically means the only way you can look at remuneration is you have to look at yourself. Any other process, any other level in government or anything level in the private sector, there's always a process, a procedure, a level, a band, or whatever the case may be. But in this particular case, there isn't. And in this particular situation, it was precipitated mostly right now due to our Prime Minister who took away our 1/3 tax-free benefit. And considering the level that we get paid, that was a pretty low blow as far as I'm concerned. Especially when last week on the television he gave $55 million to Venezuela, and there are riots right now, and they can hardly get the Canadians who live there out because they can't get the airports open. And I don't understand why he's hurting us and giving money to people that can't even get their country together. But that's another topic. What this brought up now was a discussion on how to properly resolve this issue. And there's a couple ways to go about it. And when you knock on doors, people say, "Why are you doing it?" You certainly don't get paid for it. It's a job mostly that's not on the positive side. It's most of the time the people call because they have a concern. The reason you do it is because you enjoy resolving the issues, and it gives you personal satisfaction that you can help. That's the reason that I run. But like anything else and any job you have, no matter if it's in the private sector or in the public sector, remuneration is part of what you feel rewarded for, what drives you, what makes you feel good. In the MPPs and the MP levels, the remunerations are so large that doctors and lawyers who have their own practices get into politics because it's just a switch for them from one occupation to the other. And it's a reflective. In the situation with West Lincoln, it's a little different because it is a part-time job. However, it's a job that deems a lot of responsibility. You are forming the future. You're developing what your town is going to turn into. You have been entrusted by the taxpayers that you're going to represent them and do the right things for the township and basically set the future of what this township will look like and the incorporated costs that the taxpayers have to pay in order to get those visions. They trust you with a lot. That also means something. If you're given responsibility, then usually remuneration is reflective, which brings me to two different situations that I'd like to look at. Number one, for example, in the private sector, whoever you report to always makes more than you. And it's their decision if they are going to remunerate you or they're going to terminate you. They're your boss, and they make more than you. In the situation we have with this township, we don't have individuals here. We have a council. A council is made up of 7 members. The head of the staff that runs the township of West Lincoln is the CAO. The CAO seeks direction from council. Council also has the authority to terminate anybody's position in the township, the CAOs or any staff member, if they so desire, but it has to be council's decision. So it's one person that makes that decision. But it's not one person, it's council's decision. So when you look at the numbers, if you add all the councilors' salaries together and you add the mayor's salaries together, even though the direction and the leadership comes from council through to the CAO, we actually make less. In the private sector, that would be the opposite. What I've tried to do is increase it so that it's just a little bit more than what the CAO is, because if the CAO reports to council, then the council as a whole, all 7 members, should theoretically be making more. In the private sector, it could be 50 or 100,000. It's very little based on these numbers, but at least it's something. The other way to look at it is compared to other townships. Niagara Falls is the highest paid. They get $21,451. If you look at their 1/3 that they would lose, depending on what tax rates you want to use, I spoke to my accountant and I asked him, I said, what is the poverty level in Canada? He said, 25,000. He said, after 25,000, you add GIS to it, which is Guaranteed Income Supplement. So I thought, okay, so Niagara Falls is making just a shade over the poverty level. Even though this is a part-time job, this carries a lot of responsibility. In the private sector, the remuneration is reflected on the degree. If you make multi-million-dollar decisions in the private sector, you're making 6-digit numbers. We make multi-million-dollar decisions all the time. We're discussing it tonight, multi-million-dollar decisions on what we're doing. The responsibility level is high. The remuneration should reflect the level of responsibility. It's only the right thing to do. Now, if you take Niagara Falls 21,451 and add the 1/3 that they lose at a tax rate that is high, but I picked it because nobody knows, each individual one of us, what our tax rates are, depending on your investments. It works out to $25,240. So when I said 25,000, we're still not the highest if they go through, and I believe the region has reversed the decision and they are looking after the 1/3 remuneration. So when Niagara Falls does theirs, that's where they're probably going to come out at. It's up to them, but I would assume they would do the same thing. So right now I'm looking at a level that I think is on the poverty line. It's a responsible position that's now starting to get some remuneration. It was only activated because even though we were only making 18,000, Trudeau wanted to take our tax-free benefits. So nothing, there was a song by Billy Swan in the early 70s, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. Why you would do that to somebody, there has got to be no lower level in the government of Canada than a municipal councillor. I mean, how can you get lower than 18 grand a year? I mean, come on, there's nothing left. If you look at Hamilton, for example, they make 120,000. They have 3 secretaries in a room. For example, they have one counselor in Hamilton, it was on the Hamilton Spectator. They have a protocol account. She racks up way over $10,000 because every time she visits her constituents who are out in the country, she charges gas mileage. She makes a fortune just going out to visit constituents, sometimes twice a day it was in the paper. When we visit constituents in our township, we get paid nothing. So there are certain things that we just accept, that we live in the township, we're going to do it because that's our job. In other townships, they make almost as much money in gas money as we do in a salary, not to mention their $120,000. So I don't think this is out of line. It's been a long time coming. The last increase was the one I requested when Mayor Trombetta was mayor, and we had an increase about 10 or 12 years ago. So, I mean, it's been a long time, and even then, Mayor Trombetta said, you should have tried to get more. We wouldn't have no trouble with this, because the feeling is when you knock on doors, that I don't want this job. The headaches are a lot, and we don't get paid for it. So I would hope that this would help if we are going to have another council, depending on what the premier is going to do, that this would help also for people out there to want to say, I want to take a shot at it. At least the pay's a little more decent than it was before, and attract some good people that can help to make us a better township. The more experience we have, the better we're going to make the decisions, and the better this community is going to be. And in a lot of cases, it's like business. If you want a real qualified people, and we found it here, when you look for the director and stuff, we interview people. You have to pay to get qualified people. And that's why we pay more money, is because we want the expertise. Well, the same thing should be out there in the countryside. The pay is better if you're a counselor now. More people with good qualifications will want to try to be in here, and that can only make the whole township better. So this is up for discussion. This is the way I feel. This is my thoughts on it. It was all started by our Prime Minister, but something definitely needs to be done about the 1/3. That's just ridiculous. But it is a point to start from, and I would appreciate other people's comments at this time. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I just want to correct one thing. It was a minor point, but it was in fact wrong. Council doesn't get to hire or fire any staff other than the CAO.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
did hire the
yeah.
CAO, and
And then-
CAOs have been terminated by council.
The CAOs.
CAOs.
That's the only one,
And
but not
the
staff
CAO
below.
look after the rest.
That's correct. Just wanted to get that one on the
It
record.
was minor, but thank you.
Yeah. Any other people wishing to respond? Okay, seeing none. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, this is kind of, I don't think it's ever easy to, talk about what you should be paid. Being my 2 cents on it, being my first term in council, I find it tough at face value saying like I should be given a pay raise when I feel like I've done so little already. But that being said, I can relate to Councillor Rayner's remarks with when you talk to people in the public and you tell them what you're doing, and it seems to be a common question, like, does it pay? And when you tell them how much, it's almost like a laughing matter, like, why do you bother? And you remind them that you got into it to make a difference and to have an impact on your community. But that being said, I know when I originally ran, there's things that I'm learning that I wasn't necessarily aware of that would be required in the job. And some of that has been having to pass up on contract work that could potentially put me in conflict. And as a result, too, that was something else that, I've just been, dealing with personally. It is what it is, and I signed up for this, and, I wasn't going to. When I hear the figure here, I definitely think it's quite a jump. But again, I don't know to what level of discussion the rate is by any means. But I wouldn't be against, discussing it further. I just think it's important that we, I guess have this conversation and be able to, figure maybe a happier position on it. But anyways, I just thought I would put in the 2 cents there. I do. One other thing I'll mention too is I do agree with Councillor Rayner in terms of thinking long term and what kind of councillor will be joining our community down the road. Being a business person myself, I'm a firm believer in building people up and investing into your bottom line. I think it gives you more foundation, and I think it allows you to run a little bit more efficiently, and you tend to attract maybe even a higher quality talent down the road, because it's not just, something that's, they're just doing because, they, have nothing else to do, but something they actually want to do because it's passionate, but it also is rewarding. You think of some professional who maybe makes like, I don't know, $150,000+ a year. They're going to think about retiring and they're going to do, this for, $10 to $15 or $18,000. Might not necessarily be as attractive to them. There is a lot of extra baggage that comes with the job that I think we all kind of carry very well. And we, I think we have the personalities that kind of drive us here to do that. And that being said, I don't think it's a bad idea to consider at this point to figure a way how to, improve that quality of counselor. So, thank you.
I would just like to ask a question of the Director of Finance. Was there a small increase to make us whole? And that refers to the fact that we would be bumped up to, so that quote unquote, our take home pay is unchanged. It was about $7,000, was it not?
To you, Mayor Bilsma, the $7,100 that you're referring to is the cost the township incurs with the elimination of the 1/3 tax-free allowance. The salaries paid to councillors have not been adjusted.
They have not.
No. The previous council was presented with an information report that indicated the impact of the elimination of the 1/3 tax-free allowance. In that report, we outlined the township costs and an approximate figure of what the increase would have to be to a councillor to make up the loss of the tax-free allowance. Of course, every councillor is an individual. They all have different tax rates. They all pay different taxes.
Yeah. No, I know. I just wanted, the region looked at, for 31 regional councillors and the chair, it was going to be $192,000 increase divvied up amongst the 32 members so that their quote unquote average take home pay would be unchanged. I was hoping to, because I think that it's inaccurate. This motion is inaccurate by saying that because of the elimination, in lieu of elimination is a kind of bad language there, but in the elimination of payments of the 1/3 tax-free allowance, that the $25,000 for a councillor and the $38,500 for the mayor is a lot more. There's more included in that than just the makeup for the 1/3.
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's my question. They seem high. They seem very high.
Based on the report that was presented in 2017, the estimated increase to the mayor's salary was $5,095 to bring it to $35,265. And councillor, the increase was $1,930 to bring it to $19,839. Again, that's based on 2017 figures. They've changed in 2018.
Yeah.
So it would have to be revisited.
Yeah, but okay. So generally speaking, these numbers here are reflecting not only an average, well more than an average remuneration compensation, but also reflect somewhat of a raise, quite a serious raise. At that point, on that point, then, I would like to say that I think it's absolutely unconscionable that we would give ourselves this raise. Just the discussion we just had about the budget and the impact that it is going to have on the taxpayers. At the regional level, there was a motion put forward that was successful to say, you know what, we passed on a 4% increase to the public, and they were willing to forego the $2,500 increase to their personal salary because they just felt it would be unconscionable to take a raise in a year that was going to pass on a 5% increase in taxation to the public. So there's that point. The second point that I would like to make is this was visited in 2017 and nothing was done with it. We had the opportunity to receive it for information, and the council at that time did nothing with it. It doesn't mean that we can't, but that was the sentiment of the council at the time. So we don't have to do anything to that, although, I mean, everybody makes their own decisions. The other thing that I would like to get on the record, and as a matter of principle, I think it's also has always been a personal conviction of mine that you should never vote yourself your own raise. In other words, I've always felt that if we're going to give council a raise, that we are not the first people to benefit from it. So it could be done in a very timely fashion just before an election so that everybody gets re-elected under the new terms and allows the public to see whether we're actually worthy of a raise or not by either turfing us or putting us into those positions. The fourth thing that I want to say, that if we do a comparator of other municipalities, then let's be fair, because we cannot do a comparator to Hamilton. Hamilton is a very different dog in terms of municipalities. It's a single tier. It's extremely a whole lot larger. And even there, the comparison is not just a strict wage, but a wage per capita or a wage per constituent. And I bet you'll find, and I know this to be a fact, that our remuneration per capita is probably close to the highest in the Niagara region. Just saying. You can do the math on that, but if you did our remuneration per capita of the amount of constituents that we have in our wards, it's one of the highest. In fact, almost all, the majority of the councillors in the Niagara region are getting less than us. So we're one of the highest paid. It's just a fact. Councillor Rayner picked Niagara Falls. They are, in fact, the highest. But Niagara and the Lake gets $10,000. There were 3 of them at the $10,000 level, and one of them was at the $5,000 level. And so we're at the 17. And another simple fact that's overlooked that Councillor Rayner also put forward in the last term and benefited from is the fact that we are, as far as I know, the only municipality that gives benefits to our councillors. So when you add that in, it actually makes us the most well-compensated councillors at the $18,000 level, because our benefits are about 6 per, if we take them, but they're available to us. So I think that when we do comparisons, it's very wise to compare apples to apples and not apples to watermelons. The last thing that I want to get on here is I've never, ever, 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 ever done this for the money. I do not buy that idea that if we offer more money, we get better people. No, if we offer more money, we may get worse people who are doing it just for the money because it pays well. I would say that it's equally believable that if we offered no money, we would get some very altruistic and philanthropic people to do the job for free, and we might actually conceivably get better government. So I don't buy this idea that if we offer more money, we'll just attract better people. I think that I'm wired this way. I love doing this, and for all intents and purposes, I've never done this for the money. I've never supported any increase to my salary in the 4 years that I've been on. I didn't support the benefits. I didn't take the benefits. I didn't take the protocol because I'm not in this for the money. My expense account over 4 years in the past term of council, $0. That's a fact. Because I'm not in this for the money. I take the wage that's offered, and I thank the constituents for that, for putting that trust in me. And I'm very passionate about this. I think that this motion is way out of line. I know, and it was very appropriate, not surprising to me that Councillor Rayner, you were the one that voted for the raise before, and you were also the one that initiated the benefits. So we're going to very differ on this all the time. And you put it forward, but I'm not in favor of this at all. And when the time comes to vote on this, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote. And so get that on the table now. Thank you very much. Councillor Cody and then Councillor Jonker.
I have to be perfectly honest on this. I did come in with the intention of supporting this. However, based on the conversation we just had 20 minutes ago, when majority of this horseshoe sat and talked about an unwillingness to fund services at a building that literally services every single person in our municipality, I can't, in the span of 20 minutes, say we will not fund this building that is there for everyone here, whether the people in wards 1 or 2 choose to use it or not. They have the option of using it, and this council is not willing to support service increases to that building. I can't then turn around and ask those same taxpayers that we're taking those services away from to pay me more money.
Councilor Jonker?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Bev for sharing that email that, or the what came in 2017 and the numbers, and for what it's worth, it's I agree with that we don't need to ask the public for a raise when we're looking at already going to our staff and saying we need to find a way to cut and keep things to a minimal for increase. So, and if you look at the numbers, we're going to take home, we're going to lose about, I think it was $950 take home on this. So to me, it's definitely not something we should be going to the public to ask for.
Further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The number that Councilor Rayner did come with is high. No question about it. Now, do I believe that the 1/3 that was removed by us, by the federal government, the Liberal federal government, was that appropriate for all of us? No, we had no choice in that. This might be our last term as council. I'm just saying, you know, with the new changes that are proposed by the provincial Conservative government, we might be all obsolete in the next 4 years. Which we all know it's heading coming. We just don't know how it's coming, but it's going to be heading that way. Do I believe the 1/3, which was not our choice, put back for us? For some way about myself, I think it should be. That 1/3, not the rate of Councilor Rayner proposed, but I believe that 1/3 that we lost, that's what I came in to do. Why, it's kind of telling me I'm not doing a good job, to be honest with you. Originally, this was, and I understand I'm not doing it for the money, but I did it for 4 years, and now it's kind of telling me, well, you deserve less, you're not up to your potential. That's the way I kind of take it, but I understand it's a different entity altogether. You mentioned about the benefits. I too didn't take the benefits. It wasn't for me. I didn't need it. I had benefits from my employer, but we voted on it, and you had the option to take it or not take it. So, and there's also another councillor that's not here tonight, and I don't know what her idea is on this. But do I feel the 1/3 we should, like myself, maybe get back because that was taken from me? Some part of me does, and some part of me doesn't, but I should have that option. I would like to see, and I don't know if I need an amendment to this, that council can opt in or opt out if they would like to be that 1/3 back. And you can do what you did, be like you said, I didn't take it. We're all responsible for ourselves. Maybe somebody will, maybe somebody won't. Some people use their protocol account to go to Roma, to go to FCM, and that's what that money is there for. You chose not to go use that. Some people have chosen it for training, which is provided by the council. So it's everybody's option. I would like to see if I could put an amendment to Councillor Rayner's motion that you have the option to opt in or opt out as a councillor. If you want to take that 1/3, which is only the 1/3, I'm not saying the whole 20, I don't know what the number was because I don't have it in front of me. If you want your 1/3, because the region voted for their 1/3 back, and I think it was 23-11, which is quite a substantial number. You'll have that option to vote in or vote out. It might not cost what this whole council would cost, because maybe 5 of us or 6 of us aren't going to take it, but maybe one person will. But they have to be responsible for themselves, and I'll be responsible for myself and address the public. So I would like to put an amendment, I don't know how I'm going to word the amendment, but to say if you're willing to take the 1/3 that was taken away from us and balance up to the 1/3, you bring us back to where we were, to make, so if possible, but we, as a council, we have the option to opt in or opt out. If we could word something that way, Mr. Mayor? I'm sorry, the Ms.
It
CEO would
could
like
be,
to.
but what we could also do is just kick this to staff to come back with a little bit more accurate numbers
Sure.
on that too.
Sure. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what, but I opened that up maybe
Yeah.
for further discussion with council.
Okay.
If,
I want to hear from
Sure.
Councillor Riley, and then, but we'll leave, that's hanging. Go ahead, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like that idea a lot, actually. I think that is probably the best route to go at this time anyways. So I definitely second Councillor Trombetta's idea there, if there needs to be a seconder. But that being the case, I also like your idea of being able to send it back to staff and let them figure out what that number is, and if you, like you said, we can have the decision whether we want to make ourselves whole or not, then that be, and having that there for those who can benefit from it, why not? I would like to make a comment, and I feel like I'm going to be putting you on the spot here, but I do think it's, I think a little unfair that you could say that whether you refer to the protocol account or you refer to the benefits and that you don't take that, but you take, you almost like you disregard that so much, but you still take your $30,000 paycheck, and you also get you well compensated at the region there. I think that dynamic changes a lot. Now I know you have a lot more responsibility than I do, but I do ask you to be a little bit more maybe mindful in how that comes out, because I feel like that I don't know. I felt like that was more of like a power trip than anything else, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
No, it's by way of explanation, it was, the benefit was something that was new last council, and so I didn't take it this council either, but it speaks to what Councillor Trombetta is opting out, but I don't think that we should personally benefit. There's a conflict of interest when we vote on things that benefit us, like all 7 of us are then under conflict of interest. The only way you can remove that is you put it into the next term. We had the opportunity last term. There was no appetite for it. We know that times are tough for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a huge conflict of interest to vote your own wage in.
Well, and my question, and I don't know who I'd steer this to necessarily, but I kind of wonder how that works. Is that something that we could, outsource out, if that is even worth outsourcing? I just don't understand how we could even vote for that, given the fact that it does put us in a pecuniary conflict of interest. And at the same time, we kind of, as Councillor Trombetta had mentioned too, like we were, people who've already been doing this for X amount of years, this is my first term, were already, accustomed to the 1/3 before, and using that money to, whether it's paying for gas or paying for whatever it takes to go and do your stuff. Why is that, taken away without the same kind of regard that, we'd be voting for?
Let me be clear. I'm not necessarily opposed to being made whole.
Okay.
That was a discussion that we let out, that this is not to be made whole. This will. We had some preliminary numbers. They won't change much, but they might fluctuate by 1 or 1.75% or whatever the cost of living increase changes were. But generally speaking, there's a raise portion to these. It was incorrect to say that this was the new compensation for the one. It's framed in the 1/3 tax levy.
Yes.
The 1/3 tax allowance, tax-free allowance. It was framed in that context. The 2 numbers that are shown are not accurate to the being made whole. They're a reflection of something much larger than being made whole.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think I made that very clear.
That was
when I
my
first-
comments there, yeah.
I think I made that very clear when I first addressed this, that, the price was a bit staggering, but, I think Councillor Reiner was very open to maybe just the discussion component of it, maybe just, I don't know, maybe you can answer if that was just more of a number you threw out there to kind of get us started.
Go ahead, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you. Yeah, I initially brought it up because, like I said, it's based on, to me, the reporting structure as I'm used to in the private sector, where whoever you report to always makes more than you. And in this situation, this council as a whole makes less than the CAO, which is opposite, then you don't ask direction from us because you're paid more than us. Why should we tell you what to do? You make more than us, you do what you're supposed to do. That's wrong, that's not how it works. She has to take direction from us. So that is backwards to the private sector and how the private sector works. And then with the situation that we're comparison, and in fact, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was last April or May, Councillor Chichok, I believe, asked that it be brought back to staff to review the salaries, and Carolyn Langley was supposed to have a discussion on that before the election, because that was the intent. If we were going to make a move, we were going to make it before the end of last term, so that we could have the taxpayers judge if that was acceptable or not. And that's a normal, appropriate thing to do, and that was mentioned, and for some strange reason, and I've been around a long time, this is the only thing I can remember that was referred back to staff, and I didn't mention it to Carol a couple of times in June, July, and August. I said, when's it coming back? And it never came back. So I let it go. But all of a sudden, Trudeau lights the fuse in January and says, hang on a minute now, you ain't making much, and I'm going to make sure you get less. I'm saying, okay, that's enough. Let's start from scratch and let's go forward again. So the way I had it written, it said clearly for in lieu of the 1/3 and compensation on it. I believe it also, at the same sentence, refers to a review of the actual salary level, not to mention the 1/3. If you read that last, because I made sure I wrote it in such a way that it reflected both. What did that last sentence say?
If you want to see it again, go ahead, Councilor Trombetta.
Well, hold on a minute. I'm not done. Oh, yeah, it says here clearly, the elimination of the payment of 1/3 tax-free allowance and to correct member of council's salary statement. It was all in the same sentence. So it meant both of them. It didn't try to cover one up with the other. You're just breaking the sentence down into two sentences, and that was all in one sentence. So the point is that if it's open for discussion, it was something I brought up. It wasn't precipitated by anything but this 1/3. If the council members just want to go with the 1/3, I'm fine. But it should be brought back, Mr. Mayor, to the same level it was before this happened in January the 1st. And the only reason I brought the other up is because it was an opportune time because of all the other missed opportunities, including what should have happened last summer or last fall before the election. But whatever which way they want to go, I don't think it's fair at this time at least that we should lose that 1/3 for something that we did not do.
Go ahead, Councilor Trombetta.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, I'd like an amendment to the motion to state that this goes back to staff with the option of opting in or opting out of the 1/3 decrease that was taken away from us, if that's the proper word, or increase, whichever way we could state. If that's okay with the CAO. Sorry, Wesley, guess, no, maybe. I'd like to see that, because like I said prior before, the 1/3 was taken away from us. So now, again, you know, I haven't voted for an increase either. And if the Liberal government didn't change, it'd still be my same salary as is today. But they decided to change it, which I don't know why. But anyways, but now, you know, still, I'm operating the same way. We don't charge kilometers. I visit many constituents in my area, and it's a lot of kilometers. And we're going to a lot of areas. And again, I do it for the service. But I would like to see, so it doesn't go to waste. Maybe other people might think differently than I do. But at least if it's there and you have the option of opting in or opting out, I think that would be fair. So I'd like that to go back to staff because they can show us, I'd like to still go back to staff to show us the option of opting in and opting out, what the cost is going to be, and go from there, Mr. Mayor. Or if that works, or if not.
Okay, so, you want to kick this back to staff. Go ahead, let's just hang on to this. Do I hear a seconder? No seconder on that. Then we're just going to simply vote on that now. We're just going to kick this back to staff and vote on it. Vote.
Because we don't have the numbers. We have the numbers from 2017 that would have changed for 2019.
Each one is different. If you want it, then you just go to them and say, I want it, you got it. You don't have to go to staff. You just say, I want it or I don't want it.
Counselor? Counselor? Director?
NIT. To you, Mayor Bilsma, I think it's best to send it back to staff, because there's a bylaw that is passed that relates to counselor remuneration, and we may have to change the wording to put into place that it can be returned. I don't know if it can be returned. Like, I don't know if you can opt in and out of a salary. It may end up being that it gets donated back to the township, but that's some research we would need to do. So that way we can give you a fulsome answer.
And I'm indifferent to the opt-in and opt-out. If there's a will of council to just be made whole, that's fine. But this resolution was not speaking to that. It was more than just being made whole. So there can be some research done on that. So that's why what we have before us is a motion to kick it back to staff and a seconder.
So, I have a question.
Okay, so the motion that I have is that the increase in members of council salaries to address the elimination of the 1/3 tax-free allowance and for the opting in and opting out be referred to staff for report and recommendation to be presented at the March 18th Administration Finance Fire Committee meeting.
Okay, you've heard that.
I have a mover, I have Jason.
The seconder is Councillor Cody.
Yeah, can we
It's
hear?
basically, the motion is referred to staff for March 18. Okay, in essence, all those in favor? And that's carried.
Mr. Mayor, if I could say one thing too, I think that'd be a good idea, because I believe Councillor Ganam will be back at that time, and I think it'd be worth hearing her comments too.
Beautiful. All right. That concludes our agenda for this evening. This meeting is adjourned at the hour of 8:40.